Welcome back to the conversation. I'm Francesca Fiorentini. My next guest is K. Sabil Rahman, associate professor of law at Brooklyn Law School and the president of Demos, a think and do tank that powers the movement for a just, inclusive, and multiracial democracy. Sabil, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I don't know why I'm so happy because we have to make sense of some dark, dark days. And I think I've been asking everyone I meet this, but what do you feel like is one of the main lessons that have come out or that has come out of this storming of the Capitol and the vote of 127 legislators to overturn a democratic election?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things that folks have been saying a lot, you see on Twitter and elsewhere, that this isn't America. But I think the real lesson actually is that this very much is America, right? The truth is that in our history, we have had a long-running battle between two visions of America. One is the fight to be an inclusive, multiracial democracy. And you saw that after the Civil War, you saw that in the Civil Rights Movement. You're seeing that now, what's trying to be born in, say, the Georgia results of just earlier this very week, against another very different idea of America, which is really a white supremacist, ethno-nationalist state, right? Yes. And it was the latter that stormed the Capitol, tried to violently overturn the results of an election. And by the way, that type of attempt to overthrow an election has also happened often in our history. You see lots of examples in the post-Civil War, Jim Crow South, for example, of state and local elections being violently overturned. So the lesson here is that we're in a deep, deep crisis, but this is one that has been lurking beneath the surface in our country for a long time, and one that will take a long time and real serious transformative change to get us out of it.
Absolutely. And I know we often want to look forward, and we're always told to look ahead and not backwards, and especially by Republicans who have absolutely enabled this behavior and this moment. Yeah. So, but how can we, go forward and hold those who need to be held accountable? Those who tried to overturn this election and not just normalize their behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the path ahead is really about both accountability and transformation. And so on accountability first, we're seeing some of it start to happen, right? There's acceleration in the House and in the Congress about calls for a second impeachment of President Trump over inciting an insurrection over the Capitol. I think that's exactly right. Impeachment, the remedy for impeachment means that not only is Trump removed from office, but that Congress could actually bar him from ever holding any further elected office, which is really important, right? He's technically still constitutionally eligible, right?
He was impeached. He was already impeached. Is that not the case? You know better than I do.
So he was impeached by the House, but the Senate acquitted him of those charges. So what you actually need is the Senate to also convict and remove the president, for it to stick. The other piece of accountability then is about those 100+ lawmakers that you mentioned earlier, Francesca, right? I mean, you have peer people who are using their elected power to try to support the overthrow of an election. And, as far as I'm concerned, these folks need to not only just walk back their language from yesterday, which you're seeing, it would be hilarious if it weren't so awful, right? Just kind of these people don't think that we don't know what they said just yesterday. But we need more than that. I think that there needs to be serious sanction on those lawmakers, possibly even their resignations from office. And the last piece of accountability is, I think, about the larger ecosystem that helped foment and incite these actions. So, Twitter is late to the party, but finally suspending the president's account. Experts on radicalization, on extremism, on social media and disinformation have been calling for a long time for the platforms to get serious about combating right-wing extremist violence and incitement on the platforms. That has to be a serious policy going forward.
Absolutely. And yet, these are the same lawmakers who have been okay with astroturfing things like the Tea Party when, Koch brothers and other dark moneyed interests flooded a lot of those protests. I mean, this is sort of the origin of what we're seeing now, the natural progression. It starts as a random Tea Party protest and it ends with storming the Capitol. And you've actually, I think, mentioned that there is an amendment in the Constitution that allows for Congress to be removed, lawmakers to be removed if they are aiding or abetting insurrection. Can you talk a little bit about that, or has that ever been used?
Yeah, absolutely. So the 14th Amendment has a section in it that allows for the removal from office of lawmakers who support insurrection, support seditious acts. And that was actually put in there after the Civil War with the former Confederacy in mind. Because the idea was you just literally fought a war, an actual declared war. And then what do you do with these people who were just a few years ago sitting congresspeople and senators in Washington? Do you welcome them back? And the argument at the time was that actually a republic can't continue if you have people sitting in office who are actively fomenting insurrection. And so it was written into the Constitution that a democracy can't survive in that scenario, right? You have to remove those people from power. And I think there's a real question about at what point is Senator Hawley's actions, Senator Cruz's actions, the 100+ House GOP members who still are continuing to raise questions about the election. At what point is that itself incitement for further insurrection?
Absolutely. I want to turn a little bit to that transformation, the multiracial democracy, and this huge victory that John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock had in Georgia, flipping the state blue and obviously having the first Black senator from the state. What can we learn from Georgia, and what does it mean? Just sort of your reflections on what it means in this moment.
Yeah, well, I think Georgia is very much echoing the story that has been now long forgotten in a way of November 3rd too, because we saw the same thing in Arizona and in a lot of other places in the country. What you're seeing is, I think, two things. One is a new kind of multiracial people power, bottom-up people power that is being built, block by block, brick by brick, by these incredibly powerful and committed organizers who have been working on the ground in communities of color and working class communities, creating that kind of multiracial constituency that powered Georgia and Arizona and other places. And is, Black voters, brown voters, people of color, working class folks, young folks. So that is a powerful new coalition that you're seeing emerge. But the other thing you're seeing is a growing commitment, I think, to structural transformative change, because it's one thing to win an election. We then actually have to pass legislation to prevent what has happened these last 4 years from ever happening again. And I think it's notable that a lot of these new people coming into Congress are talking about things like democracy reform, combating voter suppression, ending money in politics, and even bigger things like statehood for Washington, D.C., a majority Black city. There's a long list of things we need to fix. But I think this new Congress, now that it is a 50-50 Congress, really needs to take this opportunity to make those changes.
Absolutely, expanding democracy, I think, is our ultimate goal. What do you think everyday people can do? Like, what can we do outside of Congress to support? I mean, explicitly the squad, which grew in power within the Democratic caucus, more progressive members, bringing way more racial diversity, like class diversity. It feels sometimes like we can just be these cheerleaders, but like we can do more than that. As the president of a think and do tank, what's the do?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of it is continuing to put pressure on and both support and pressure on our elected officials at the state and local level, because it's one thing to win an election, but we still need to pass legislation and make these changes happen. And so continuing to call your elected representatives to push for the kind of democracy reforms that we were talking about. But I think what we're seeing is our democracy only works when all of us actually show up. And showing up is not just in the streets, but in the ballot box and even in office. So one thing I'm really eager to see is all of young folks, people of color, new folks who have been activated these last few years. Can we get more of these people, more of us, kind of folks to run for office, run for your state and local offices, get involved in the political process, to join as full-time members, grassroots organizations, unions, right? That's the back end infrastructure of people power. And people power has to be more than just voting. We want it to actually grow over time. So I think there's a lot more that we can do. I'm actually really hopeful about the future of our democracy because of the sheer inspirational power of just our community showing up from the uprisings this summer, right through November, right through Tuesday in Georgia.
Yes, if we can focus on that, I also feel hopeful. Last question, because the muck is not going to leave us that quickly. But how do you feel like we neutralize some of these 75 million people who voted for Trump. Does he? Do they peter out? What are your thoughts? I know this is a huge question for 1 minute we have left, but
they're going to keep mobilizing. I think we have to do both, have accountability, but also response, right? So like accountability in terms of actually prosecuting people who are being violent, who are attacking our institutions, attacking other people. Like 4 people died in the attack on the Capitol. But I think that's where we need to break the hold of social media that is spreading disinformation, accelerating radicalization, and make those structural democracy reforms that makes it so that these 75 million people don't have outsized political power, right? The Democrats have 50 seats in the Senate, but they represent 40 million more people than the 50 Republicans in the Senate. That is untenable in the long run.
Absolutely. Reform it all. Thank you so much. K. Sabil Rahman, president of Demos, a Think and Do tank. Check him out. We got your handle at somewhere at some point.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, and please take good care.
Yeah, be safe. Thanks, Francesca.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.